Guys, so a new artifact came out a couple days ago. It's called the Candle of Neuron, and it seems to be pretty overpowered. But right now, the community is kind of split, and people aren't exactly sure whether to take it in their loadout or not. And this is just kind of to clarify where it stands from a mathematical perspective and why it is absolutely a must in most might-based loadouts. So, yeah, to get into it, a little bit of background you might need to know is crit percent, crit damage multiplier, what these values are, how they work. So how they work is crit chance means every time you activate an ability, there's a certain percent chance that it does its base damage, but then on top of that, it does its crit damage multiplier times that base damage. So meaning if you have a crit percent chance of like 5 and you have a crit damage multiplier of 1, there's a 5% chance every time you hit an ability, it does double the damage pretty much. That's one way to think about it. So the base values are 28.5% chance for the crit percent chance, and that just means that's the base value plus what your SP allocated, and then plus the ultimate leg mod, and then crit damage multiplier is 1.06. And then just to give it a bit more of a realistic in-raid feel for more top-level DPS, because I know that that's who this is going to kind of cater to. Those are the people who are going to level this at 200 and use it. Claw gives +5 in each, which would lead you to 33.5% chance crit, and then 1.11 for the multiplier, and then of course static if you had a 5k supercharge, rage or something, berserk. That puts you at 39.5% chance crit and 1.11 for the multiplier. And of course these two here, claw and static, don't really affect the comparison between trans and neuron because they'll be there for both, but it just gives more of a realistic feel to the calculations. And just a little more background before we go into the calculations is the concept of expected value. And I know it's a bit daunting, but if you're not familiar with it, it's really simple. It just means over a certain large number of tries, eventually your average will approach the expected value. So if you were to activate an ability 1,000 times, let's say Omega Beam 1,000 times, the average of each Omega Beam's damage will be equal to the expected value or very close to the expected value. If you were to activate Omega Beam once, it may not be close at all. But yeah, expected value is what that average approaches over a large enough sample size. And then in this case, this is what's called a discrete probability distribution, and we can use something called this formula here. So I'm not pulling it out of my ass. It actually exists, and it makes intuitive sense. The expected value is simply the probability of one value occurring times that value itself, and then you sum those all up. So yeah, we can now get into the calculations. If you don't understand it yet, that's fine. We can kind of brush it over again in the control group, which is neither are equipped. As we can see here, based on these values from earlier, there's a 60.5% chance you don't crit, and there's a 39.5% chance you do crit. So if you don't crit, you just do the one multiplier damage. If you do crit, the 39.5% chance you do crit, you do the 1 plus another 1.11, meaning the expected value, as seen in the formula here, is the 60.5% chance times the 1 plus the 39.5% chance times the 2.11. And when you add those up, you get a 1.438. So what does this 1.438 mean? It means if you were to activate an ability like Omega Beam and it did not crit, over 1,000 times, if you were to take the average of every Omega Beam, whether it crit or not, the average value would approach 1.438 times the non-crit value. So this is just a useful measure to compare different configurations because the base value might change, but the ratio will not change, and that's the most important part, the ratio. So now we can go over Transcard only, and if you don't know what Transcard does, it does pretty much this right here. So we can see that it does 20% critical chance additional and 30% critical magnitude on attacks. Reduce total damage and healing done by 15%. So yeah, these are the three things it does, and it only gives 3.3% might, not compared to Neuron's 5%, but we don't have to worry about that now. So given that we know it does that, we can list those three things out: 20% crit chance, 0.3 crit multiplier, and minus 15% overall damage. So now augmenting those probabilities from earlier, we have 39.5% chance goes to 59.5% chance, and 1.11 goes to 1.41 multiplier. So now that we have our tree going, once again, we see there's a 40.5% chance we hit the 1. And there's a 59.5% chance that we hit the 1 plus the 1.41. So the expected value can be calculated as such. 40.5% chance times 1 plus 59.5% chance times 2.41, which would give you a value of 1.838. And again, if you don't believe me, you can pull out your calculator, do it again here. You can see I was calculating some values earlier, so not just writing random stuff down. I do advise you to calculate yourself, it'll give you a better appreciation for the math behind it, and it'll make more sense to you. But yeah, so as you can see, 1.838 compared to 1.438, yeah, it's like a 30% increase, pretty big, However, what you don't factor in yet is that there's minus 15% overall. So when we subtract 15% from this, it's the same as multiplying it by 0.85, which would give us 1.562. And now when we compare 1.562 to the 1.438, it's not even a 10% increase in damage. It's minimal. It's very low. And that's for level 200 artifact, which is, I think, almost a letdown, Not even 10% damage. That's like, what, two buffs right there. 2 buffs is equal to 1 artifact. That doesn't seem fair to me, Consider, like, if you were to take Ebon artifact, it does over 20% extra damage, It's not that 30% exact because the might is additive, no multiplicative, but yeah, it's still well over 20% extra damage. So now we'll look at Neuron's passive only, and this is just the passive, not considering the active. And once again, the active is very helpful and it'll do a lot more damage, but yeah, we're not even going to consider that. We're just going to consider the active here. And just to show that the passive itself is better than Transcard. So if you're not familiar with the art, which many of you won't be as it just came out, it gives 5% might, which is 2% more than the Transcard, but we're not even going to factor that in. And we're not even going to factor this helpful active in, which does damage in and of itself, and it increases your crit ability damage, but we're not even going to consider that. We're just going to look at the Devil's Deal. 15% increased critical ability attack chance. So just that itself. Now, nothing else affects that. If we're not even going to use the active, we're just going to put this artifact on. We're not even going to put the active in our ability bar, so we don't have to waste ability on it. We just put it in the ability. We just put it in the artifact slot. Take that out. Now we go over the calculations for this. So we have 15% ability crit chance. Going back to our original values, you have 39.5% and 1.11, which now gets augmented to 54.5% and 1.11 crit multiplication. And if we construct our tree again, we have 45.5% chance of hitting the 1 and 54.5% chance of hitting the 1 plus another 1.11. So the expected value can be calculated as such: 45.5% chance times 1 plus 54.5% chance times 2.11, which would give us a value of 1.605. And this is kind of crazy to me because just this passive itself is already better than the trans value. And that's not even considering the 2% might this gives on top of that. So I thought, yeah, that was kind of crazy to me. And just if you want some more visualization on how it impacts it, you can see here that 1.562, which is the value from trans, over 1.438, which will give you an 8.6% increase by equipping trans artifact, not considering the might bonus from 200 level artifact, and 1.605 is from the Neuron, and that leads to 11.6% increase by Neuron passive only. So you can see it's already 3% better than trans, and that's not even by using the active. And I can go over the calculation for the active in a different video, but it brings this number from 11.6% closer to 17%, and possibly more depending on if there's more targets in the area. But yeah, so that's one of the big things for me. I think there's not really a reason to run trans on might DPS anymore. And of course, this Neuron artifact doesn't work on Prec. It's only ability-based damage. It doesn't work on healing either. So it's just a direct upgrade of Transcard just by the passive only for might DPS. And I think the ideal loadout is Neron, Omega, and Ebon, and you'd be swapping Ebon for trans probably, because that seems to be the most efficient use of damage right now. And yeah, that's pretty much it.